A Quiet Place Day One is in theaters, and I've got my thoughts right now. This video is brought to you by The Perfect Gene. Go to theperfectgene.nyc and use code DAN15 for a special offer, and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of A Quiet Place Day One. I was away on a little vacation this past week, which is why my review is a little bit later than it usually is. So what I'm going to do is do my regular review without spoilers first, and then I have a few spoiler thoughts to add at the end since the movie is already out. But don't worry, I'll give you plenty of warning before I go into those spoiler thoughts. Let's get into the non-spoiler stuff first. A Quiet Place Day One is the third film in the series and a prequel to the first two. A Quiet Place Part 2 was delayed over a year by COVID and was one of the first major theatrical releases when theaters reopened back in 2021. John Krasinski hands over writing and directing reins for this one, having developed the story with new writer-director Michael Sarnowski, whose feature debut Pig was one of my favorite films of 2022. A lot of times an indie director is brought in for one of these big studio movies in order to really let the machine drive things and just kind of be a warm body in the director's chair, but that's not the vibe that I get from this movie at all. Instead, Sarnowski delivers another solid effort as a director that feels bigger than the first two, but also maintains the intimate feel and focus on the characters. A Quiet Place Day One flashes back to the very beginning of the alien invasion in one of the biggest and loudest cities in the world, New York. Lupita Nyong'o plays Samira, a New Yorker on a day trip to Manhattan who gets caught up in the invasion with her cat Frodo. While quietly evading the aliens, she meets up with Eric, played by Joseph Quinn, a law school student who's overwhelmed with what's going on. Jaimon Unsu also returns as his character from A Quiet Place Part 2, but it feels more like he's mainly here to provide some franchise continuity, and he doesn't have a huge role to play. Now, this movie fairly obviously has a larger budget than the last two movies, but it's not an obscenely larger budget. You can actually see the version of this movie in your head that could have been the $150 million version, where we have the big military fight against the aliens and it's all action all the time with a big ensemble cast. That's not what we get here. We do see glimpses of some of that stuff, but it is always through the eyes of our two main characters who we stay with throughout the film. It was smart, I think, to avoid this excess, both financially and creatively. I don't think that a massive blockbuster would have felt in sync with the previous two movies, and it is much more effective to root for the survival of two characters that we know than 20 characters that we barely get to meet. The film also doesn't belabor the mystery of what's going on or how to avoid the aliens, which is good because we, as the audience, already know that stuff. And things like water being able to cover the sound of people talking are introduced in ways that weave themselves into the storytelling. And as with the other two movies, the sound design is a key element in this film. And I think that the team did a really great job, not just with the sound of the aliens and the quietness and everything else, but even things like when we have a scene where the characters are speaking to each other, there's always a sound in the background, at least, that helps us to understand as an audience why these two characters can be talking when they usually can't. It's a small thing, but it's something that even subconsciously helps to boost your enjoyment of the film. The parts where the movie really broadens its scope all involve the size and ferocity of the alien invasion. When we're able to see the sheer number of aliens that attack, it becomes clearer to understand just how these unseeing but all-hearing aliens were able to hunt humanity to near extinction. And they remain scary, often lurking in dark corners to detect the smallest sound or jumping on screen suddenly when you know they're nearby. A Quiet Place Day One does rely on several jump scares, as the previous movies did, but they don't feel excessive, save for one. There's one scare in the movie that felt like it was a studio note, like somebody was sitting there with the stopwatch and said, you know what, there hasn't been a scare in about 10 minutes and there's not going to be another one for another 10 minutes, so we really need to kind of manufacture something here. It's effective, but it felt cheap. I mean, heaven forbid that we allow the movie to be driven by the characters. But these compromises are few and far between, and A Quiet Place Day One is first and foremost a survival story, and an effective one because we care about the humans and the feline involved in what's going on. Lupita Nyong'o already turned in one of the best horror performances of the last several years in Jordan Peele's Us, and here she delivers another one as a character who's no stranger to fighting for her life, who refuses to let the aliens destroy what hope she has left. Joseph Quinn has been relatively quiet since his breakout role on Stranger Things a couple years ago. Here he proves that he's not a one-hit wonder as a completely different kind of character who's in many ways the opposite of Nyong'o's, often paralyzed by the weight of what's happening. These differences allow the characters to interact in interesting ways and to change each other over the course of the film, and I think that both roles were very well cast and are both very well acted. And then we have Frodo, Samira's beloved cat, played by two cat actors in the film. I've seen people mention before how odd it is that audiences will get so invested in the survival of a cat or an animal when thousands of humans are being killed by aliens on screen. All I can say is that yes, human psychology is strange, but it's also somewhat predictable. And I was as invested in the survival of this cat as I was the human characters. And this is the fact that I think that the movie anticipates and exploits, but not in a cynical or cruel way. Regardless, I think that Frodo is a heavy frontrunner already for Best Movie Pet of 2024. Overall, I don't really have much bad to say about A Quiet Place Day One. It's an effective horror thriller that delivers on pretty much all fronts. It expands the mythology, delivers some new characters to care about, and doesn't feel like a tired retread of a premise that we've seen twice already. I suppose there are some audiences who could be disappointed because they maybe anticipated the bigger action version of the story that I talked about earlier, but I think that this is a movie that delivers as interesting a chapter as the first two in the franchise, which on movie 3, especially in the horror genre, is a pretty impressive feat. I wouldn't put it at quite the same level as the first Quiet Place film, but I think I would put it above the second one, though I admittedly haven't revisited that movie in a while. Overall, I'm giving it a solid rating in the It's Good category, and I think it continues this summer's hot streak of big movies that actually don't disappoint as far as quality. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts on A Quiet Place Day One. If you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want to hear some spoiler thoughts, then now would be the time to pause that review, go see the movie. I think it's good. I think you'll enjoy it. And then come back and hear these thoughts. So, last chance to remain spoiler-free in 3, 2, 1. On the character level, I think the decision to make Lupita Nyong'o a hospice patient near death was a really interesting wrinkle to add to the story. Her survival was never really at stake. It was just more of a question of how she would die and what it would mean. I was convinced that she was going to sacrifice herself to save Eric, but thinking back on that, that would seem too reminiscent of the first movie, and I actually like what the movie did. She did what she had to do to allow Eric and Frodo to escape, but she also gets to die on her own terms, a choice that fate seemed to have taken away from her along with her cancer diagnosis. I really like the scene with her and Eric enjoying pizza in the jazz club where her father played piano. And again, playing on the expectation game, I was convinced that something was going to happen. They were going to knock the glass over, or Frodo was going to jump on the piano and make a sound, and the aliens were going to come crashing in and break up this moment of happiness. But no, the movie was content to just let them have this moment of peace before we go into the final push of the film. It may have been the less quote-unquote exciting choice for the movie, but I think it was the right one for these characters and for the story that the movie was telling. And I think we should acknowledge and maybe thank the film for not killing Frodo, because the longer that cat survived, the more angry I was ready to be if the movie killed him off. But Frodo and Eric both got a happy ending and hopefully weren't part of the island slaughter in the second movie. Now, I'm sure that my status as a cat owner affected my investment in Frodo's survival, but I also like that the movie allowed itself to add a dash of hope to a story that by definition, by the fact that we know it's a prequel, we know that this invasion is going to spread, has a somewhat hopeless ending. We don't get the ultimate victory over the aliens in this movie. Far from it. Now, one thing I'm interested to hear more about is the process of making the movie itself, because I noticed watching the film that there were a few scenes that were featured in the trailer, which seems to have played before every single movie I've seen this year so far, that weren't in the film itself. That's not necessarily unusual, and there were a couple scenes that seem to have just been cut from the movie. The biggest one being a scene where we have our two characters planning their escape on a subway map. There was also a shot of two people sitting in the dark, seemingly post-invasion. That's not a big surprise, but there were two moments that seem to have been either shot specifically for the trailer or that were part of a version of the movie that was either completely retooled or reshot. One was the moment where Lupita Nyong'o whispers "run" just before the crowd attempting to escape on the ferry was slaughtered. I didn't see where that moment necessarily would have fit in the movie, and I was surprised that it wasn't there. And there was one scene that was completely different, the generator scene. In the trailer, an old man, who I think may have been the guy who was doing the marionette performance, runs to turn it off and is killed by the alien, but in the movie, it's Alex Wolff's character. And I'd be curious to know if that was an alternate scene completely that was shot to cover up the fact that Alex Wolff's character was going to die in that scene, or if there was a version of the movie where it was the old man who died, but they went back and reshot that, maybe to give that Alex Wolff character a bigger stake in the movie. Maybe he was just left behind or faded into the background as some of the other characters do, and there was a decision to beef up that part. That's going to be an interesting thing that I want to know more about. Regardless, though, these trailer moments that weren't in the movie didn't feel deceptive. That's how I sometimes feel when there's something in the trailer that's not in the film. It just felt like the process of making the film and made me more interested in what that process was. And really, A Quiet Place Day One, we'll see what the box office numbers are, but if it does well, and it seems like it's going to do well, specifically because it was made on a somewhat lower budget, I think it's just an extension of maybe what we're learning here, which is that at the summer box office, movies that are generally well received by audiences and critics, movies like Bad Boys Ride or Die, Inside Out 2, and now A Quiet Place Day One, are performing well, whereas some of the things that were a little bit more divisive or perhaps a little bit more mediocre as far as reception didn't do well. It could be that quality is winning out because we've seen a huge uptick in performance, and we'll talk about it on charts in a couple days, a huge uptick in performance in films, and they're also films that people seem to like. It seems like a simple formula, but maybe that's really the secret ingredient to what's been ailing the box office this entire time. So those are my thoughts on A Quiet Place Day One. What do you think about the movie? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I'm going to thank my sponsor for this review, The Perfect Jean. I have a confession to make. I'm not very kind to my blue jeans. I wear them year-round in every season and every kind of weather and for pretty much every kind of activity, and I've spent years looking for the perfect jeans. Well, it turns out they were right under my nose because the perfect jean actually makes the perfect jeans. They're great looking, perfect fitting jeans that are stretchy where they need to be and tight where you want them to be. And that perfect fit means you're not endangering any, critical equipment just so you can look good. The perfect jean has 6 fits from skinny to thick, with waist sizes from 26 to 50 and lengths from 26 to 38. So they've got the perfect size for you. And they always have free shipping, exchanges, and returns, so you can have peace of mind knowing that your order is completely risk-free. You know those jeans that you wash first and wear almost as soon as they're out of the dryer? That's the perfect jean for me. Whether I'm going out, staying in, or just walking around, I always know that I'll be comfortable, and hey, I'm gonna look decent too, at least from the waist down. The flannel shirts, there's nothing you can do about that. It's finally time to stop crushing your family jewels in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectjean.nyc. Fans of the show get 15% off your first order, plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code DAN15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code DAN15. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support the show and tell them that we sent you, F your khakis, and get the perfect jean. Thanks to The Perfect Jean for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.